Hello there. I'm Michael Graham. I'm the president and co-founder of Midwestern Securities Trading Company. And on this interview for Banking on Growth, I'm fortunate to be with my friend, Tony Cole. Tony was the co-founder and chief learning officer of Anthony Cole Training Group. Tony and I have a great relationship, as you'll hear us interact throughout this interview, that goes back to a BISA conference, Bank Insurance Securities Association conference, where we met over 10 years ago, where Tony was the guest speaker, the expert speaker to the room of bank and credit union execs. I stuck around after Tony's interview and met him. And then throughout that conference, we became friends. We've since hired Anthony Cole Training Group at Midwestern Securities. And many of our bank clients have hired Anthony Cole Training Group throughout the years as well. So when we're thinking of content providers and industry experts to share with our audience, Tony was top of mind. So although I know Tony very well and trust Tony, and you'll find that we have a lot in common, including our passion for this industry and our passion for helping people and living up to the potential that we're given, I want to share a little bit with the audience, Tony, about who you are and what made you the man that you are today. So Tony was born and raised in the blueberry capital of the world, Hamilton, New Jersey. Tony grew up on a farm and grew up in a world where there were no days off. It was 7 days on. And Tony's dad had a favorite saying, when everything else fails, hard work works. And Tony, as you look back and you reflect on a very successful career, I know that that's guided you well. So Tony has taken that work ethic and his passion to succeed and be the best man that he can be throughout his life, where he played Division I football as a lineman for University of Connecticut. Then he went on to coach. His passion for helping people goes back many years, where he coached at University of Cincinnati, Iowa State University, and then became the regional sales manager for Nautilus exercise equipment. And then 30 years ago, you and your wife, Linda, started Anthony Cole Training Group. So 30 years, quite a ride, Tony. Linda and Tony have been married for over 29 years. And I know, Tony, you believe it to your core. This is what you were called to do. You were called to help people and organizations be the absolute best that they can be, help them realize their greatest potential so that they can experience and have the life of abundance as promised in John chapter 10, verse 10. So, Tony, we're thankful to have you on our podcast today, and really appreciate your generosity with your time, expertise, and knowledge in the financial services industry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Michael. I'm humbled by that introduction in our long-standing friendship. So thanks for inviting me to do this with you today.
You're welcome. We're thankful you're with us. I want to start with the first question for you. Tony, what do you do? And can you give us a little bit more of the company background? What does your company do to help financial services professionals and institutions?
At the risk of sounding like an elevator pitch, the best way to describe what we do is we help organizations and people within those organizations find revenue growth, within the organization, and capture revenue growth outside the organization in a market space that they didn't know that they were capable of doing. And there's a lot behind that, but at the end of the day, Michael, I've had this conversation with you and with presidents and CEOs around the country. There are very few business owners, presidents of companies and banks, who really get excited about investing in sales training. But when you talk about revenue growth and how to improve NIM, how do you improve efficiency ratios, how do you get more out of your staff, that's what will get their attention, and that's what we do. Now, I won't say the secret sauce, Michael, for you and the audience behind that, and I won't go into a bunch of detail because I'd eat up all 30 minutes talking about it, is taking a look at people's behaviors, their will to be successful in selling, take a look at their sales DNA and their sales competencies, and understanding, how those all play in to the gap between how they could be performing, the outcomes they could be getting, and what they're getting today. And then based on that science-based, not data, we put together the training and development program to work with the management leadership as well as the salespeople.
Can you give us a little bit more specifics? Say a bank engages Anthony Cole Training Group. How would that process develop, and how would that play out?
The tricky part here, Michael, is at the very beginning. I've got an appointment with a fellow this afternoon, and he wants to know what we do. And just like most salespeople, you got to be a little cautious about jumping in and giving the elevator pitch. And so the whole process starts with a discovery discussion we have with, okay, so if you were the bank president and you say, Tony, what do you do? I'm going to start with, well, I ask a lot of questions to find out, what's happening or not happening in your organization. And based on how you answer those questions, that'll really dictate what we get into next about what we do. But let's just assume for a second, Michael, that you and I, we meet at a conference, all right, and we talk about the stuff that we do. And you come up to me afterwards, well, from a quote unquote sales perspective, that's a clear indication that there's something going on in your world that would cause you to approach me and say, hey, Tony, I'd like to find out more about what you do. All right. And so let's get past that to kind of give you the ABCs of our process. And the A is the first thing we do is we do an assessment. It'd be no different than, you're driving your automobile to a mechanic shop and you're saying it's not running right, fix it. Well, the first thing they're going to do is to do an analysis. And the same thing with a doctor, same thing with a dentist. We operate the same way. So the very first step is we use Objective Management Group, as you know, that they've assessed over 25,000 organizations, over 2 million people. And that's our first step. And then our next step is to bring those findings to you and say, this is what you have. This is what's driving the results you do get. And if we worked on these things that fall in the category of will to sell, sales DNA, sales skills, then here's your predicted outcome. And then based on that information, we have a roadmap that tells us, okay, so we need to work with your sales managers, probably on performance management. We need to work with them on their coaching skills, their time allocation for coaching, their recruiting, their motivating, and holding people accountable. And then on the flip side with the salespeople, the primary thing are two areas. And I'll close this up so you can ask another question. Is first of all, what's their milestone-centric sales process? Most of the time, that's one of the reasons that people are successful is because they don't have a methodology. So that's probably more than what you wanted to know and everybody else wanted to know. But that's kind of where we are.
No, that's really important. That's exactly what I wanted to know, Tony. And I think that we work primarily with community banks and credit unions and institutions in the Midwest that really don't have a sales management process, and their salespeople probably don't have really great sales training to start with. A lot of times, I think that the results are inconsistent, or they might be personality driven or network driven. But beyond that, I don't see a lot of community banks being consistent and disciplined in sales management with regular meetings, measuring the important things, and really investing time in their people and requiring their people to invest time in themselves to grow. I was listening to another podcast not too long ago that one of our financial advisors shared with me. And this particular presenter said that the top financial advisors need to spend 3 to 4 hours a day on professional development, which is extreme. I probably have 10 books going any given day, and I listen to multiple podcasts every given day. But somewhere between the average salesperson goes through a pretty unintentional, the average salesperson and financial institution goes through a pretty unintentional sales process, and somewhere between that and 3 to 4 hours a day, like the podcast I was listening to, has to be something that allows for a good work-life balance, but allows for top performers to develop and to generate the fruits of their labor.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And there are multiple challenges to this whole thing, Michael. And what I attempt to do when I'm talking to the group for the very first time, because I promise you that, if you're the president of a company, the president of a bank, CEO of the bank, you watch this talk, you got excited, your executive committee is all jacked up about this, but I promise you the first day that your team shows up, they're sitting there going, oh, really, we got to do this? And so we try and create a story, okay, a narrative that they can probably relate to. And normally that narrative is, think about any professional doing anything. I don't care if it's a physician, I don't care if it's a CPA, I don't care if it's a musician or an athlete, but athletes are the most visible. So I normally tend to go that direction. And one of my favorite stories is about, and you can have a different opinion about Pete Rose, but Pete Rose was one of the all-time greatest hitters, if not the greatest hitter ever. And that man, during the game, spent time underneath the stadium hitting balls off a tee. The greatest in the game. Mm-hmm. In a football game, maximum amount of time spent in action is 18 minutes, maximum. Football teams and players spend hours in practice, hours studying film, hours studying the opponent for 18 minutes of action. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to look at ourselves at professionals at what we do, in my mind, it just makes a little bit of sense that we need to invest some time to get better at our craft, Michael.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. Tony, how did you get into coaching in the financial services industry? What's your origin story?
The origin story is I came out of the life insurance business. I'm not originally, but as you mentioned, I worked for Nautilus Exercise Equipment. I met my lovely wife, Linda, and I'll give you a quick correction on the bio. It's 39 years, not 29. We're proud of those long years of being married. And we got here, and I didn't have a job, so I got into the financial services business with Life of Vermont, and I absolutely was terrible at it. I really struggled, and so I had to hire a coach. And so I got involved with a coach and worked with him for about 3 years. We thought we might be able to go into business together, and we just couldn't make the chemistry work. But I had already had one foot out the door. I was up one morning reading the good book, and a message came to me that says, go take this step and you'll never fail. So I had a natural marketplace in that industry when I started. And so when I decided to take this step and take this move, I just started calling on people that knew me. And part of my sales approach with them as a wholesaler was always teaching them how to sell. And that's why they did business with me, because they felt I brought more to the table than just a disability product. And so that's how we got our start. And for a while, Michael, we trained and coached, 3 of the top 100 insurance brokerage operations in the country. And then one of those guys left and went into banking. And that's how we got into banking.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Tony, what do you see as problems facing community banks right now? And how does your team help solve some of these?
Well, certainly as we speak here today, in June of 2023, I don't want to call it an upheaval, but certainly the bit of a tsunami wave that hit the banking industry with the closures and all that kind of stuff caused a lot of chatter, okay, where the ripple effect was felt out into the community banks because people were nervous about what was going on with their money. And then certainly the other big thing is the economy. And I'm not going to get political about that, but I read an article in Fortune magazine where with the, I guess it was, I don't remember the processes that were put in place to stress test banks. Okay, I don't remember the name, but it escapes me right now. But in reading this article, they stress test banks if everything collapsed. What they didn't stress test was interest rates going way up when you had a bunch of deposits and loans out there at different rates. So that's what contributed to the problem. So anyway, here's the answer may not directly answer the question you ask about today's banks, because this is my feeling, Michael, is that you've been in this. I mean, how long have you been in this business, Mike?
27 years.
Yeah. And you've heard me say this in front of groups. If you've been in this business, any kind of business, for any extended period of time, I always ask my audience, when has it ever been smooth sailing?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's never been. So what I try and get our bank clients to understand is, let's not panic. We've been through something like this before. You hang around long enough, you're going to run into it again. And so this goes back to your early discussion. What organizations need are systems and processes to execute to, regardless of what's going on around them. And if you love the process will love you back. So that's what we're trying to get them to do, is let's execute the process, let's execute the business strategy, and let's forget about the noise, because when everybody else is crying about the noise, you'll be in a marketplace doing what you're supposed to do.
Currently, I'm the president of a holding company board of directors that owns a community bank. So we had our annual shareholder meeting last week, actually, and we were talking about some of these out of our control, uncertainties in the global marketplace, and specifically as financial services. And that's kind of how I summed up my comments at the holding company board meeting was, that's business as usual. These out of control uncertainties are business as usual. We have to look at them for opportunities to learn, opportunities to improve, opportunities to move forward, while others are fearful. And we want to keep, systematically, I think systems was a word that you used, systematically improving while others slow and others falter. Let's use these as an opportunity to move forward confidently, not fearfully, but focus on what is in our control, and what can we measure, what can we manage, what can we hire to better, what can we train to better. I think community banks, one of our unique abilities is the ability to stay close to the street and close to our customers' ear, that the big publicly traded banks and digital banks can't do. So how do we train and reinforce those behaviors at the teller line or throughout the whole institution to gather information and share information and listen proactively and help proactively bring solutions to our customers? That's the advantage that the community institutions have. But that doesn't happen just randomly. You don't hire people off the street and say, hey, it's going to be X dollars an hour or X amount per year, and this is where you do it, and this is how you take deposits, and this is how you do whatever, right? It has to have extra training and reinforcement of that training. Tony, if you had to estimate the community banks that you've interacted with throughout the years, what percentage of them have good and systematic training processes in place and have those expectations of proactivity and communication that I'm referring to?
I'm going to break my answer down into two parts, and because it's most organizations, most of the banks have conversations about expectations. And I know that you've been experienced with this. You get into probably October of the year, November of the year. It's kind of interesting. One of my clients, when we started working with them, called me up at the end of November and said, Tony, as a result of the conversation you had with us about establishing budgets and extraordinary schedules, for the first time in the history of our organization, we have a budget in place before the end of the year for the next year. So they have the conversation, okay, but the conversation sounds like this. Okay, Michael, your loan portfolio is 20 million. Next year, I expect it to be 25. Now, part A of your original question, what do they do to help you systematically and via a process, either through coaching and training? What do they bring to the table to help you accomplish that? And boy, I might be shooting myself in the foot here, but the percentage of organizations, not just banks, is tiny. It's tiny, Michael. I mean, there's thousands of community banks out there, and we over our history, we've probably worked with close to 100, and that's a fraction. That's a fraction, and if they do anything, okay, they do a one-day event and think that's training.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fond of saying you train animals, you coach people, and you got to change behaviors and mindsets. That requires ongoing coaching. So hope that answers your question.
So if a bank or financial services company of any type, insurance agency, credit union, hires you, what sort of results or next steps, takeaways would they expect to see?
But that is a great question, and we get asked that question 100% of the time. Tony, what can we expect? As you would with anything. If you went out and bought a car, you're going to ask, what can I expect in terms of mileage or maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So it's obviously the right question. And so it's I tell them, this is what you can expect immediately. You can expect anecdotal proof that something is changing. All right. As you can expect some collateral damage. The thing that's really important to understand, and you were talking about something before about you kept calling our salespeople, and I'm fond of going in front of every bank that we meet with for the first time. I asked them, okay, so let me ask you all a question. How many of you got into this business hoping to be a salesperson? Show of hands. No hands go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they don't go into the business thinking like a salesperson, all right? And so when we start to have conversations with them about the types of things that salespeople typically do, there's some resistance, but something works. They try something and they get a positive result, and so the anecdotal thing happens. The second thing that happens, especially if they put in place the system or process of performance management, building an extraordinary goal, building the success formula, creating huddles to inspect what you expect. The next thing that they can always count on is improved activity. Outcomes are a result of effort and execution. All right. The first thing we need to get people doing is to establish that stake in the ground somewhere down in the future, build a formula to get there, and then make sure they're doing the steps in the activity. So that's the second thing they can expect. And then within 6 months, someone's going to walk in one day and say, holy cow, you can't believe what just happened. Okay. And they're going to talk about the $5 million loan they just got or the $100,000 deposit they just got. So that's kind of the sequencing of what happens. Mm-hmm. A quick narrative is I just came back from a board meeting with one of our clients, and they're just so jacked up of having 17% loan growth year over year. I mean, now some of your clients, that might be a pittance, but for most organizations, they're pretty excited about that. So that's where we'll get to.
Excellent. I think that last answer was worth the whole podcast, just hearing those thoughts from you. Tony, this has been fantastic. If our listeners want to learn more about Anthony Cole Training Group, how do they do that?
They should call you.
Okay, awesome. Call me, 800-732-8601 at Midwestern Securities, and I will refer you to Anthony Cole Training Group. But seriously, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, probably the best thing to do is for anybody to investigate a little bit. Go to our website, anthonycoletraining.com. Okay. And take a look at what we do. Find out, download something for free. Our phone number is 513-791-3458. Ask for Jenny. Okay, she's our chief marketing officer. She talks to all those people who have an interest in us. That's the best way to track us down. If they want to reach out to me, Tony at anthonycoletraining.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tony. This has been fantastic. I know there's some gems in here that our audience is going to love. Thank you.
I appreciate it, buddy. Thank you so much.